The morning started like any other in the glass tower that bore his name. Marcus Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, watching the city wake beneath him. 32 floors below, people rushed through their lives, unaware that somewhere above them sat a man who could buy their dreams or fund their failures with a single signature. His reflection stared back at him. Sharp suit, sharper jawline, eyes that had learned to read balance sheets better than faces. At 37, Marcus had everything a man could want, everything except certainty about the one thing that mattered most. Behind him, his assistant Daniel cleared his throat softly. "She's here, sir." Waiting in the executive lounge, Marcus turned slowly. "How does she seem?" Daniel hesitated. "Happy. Excited, actually. She mentioned something about dinner reservations at Aurelio's tonight." Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. Aurelio's. The restaurant where a single bottle of wine cost more than most people's monthly rent. Of course, she had made reservations there. "Thank you, Daniel." "That will be all." As the door clicked shut, Marcus moved to his desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside lay a thick folder, its contents gathered over 6 months by one of the city's most discreet private investigators. He had met Victoria Ashford at a charity gala 8 months ago. She had walked into the ballroom like she owned it, wearing a dress that caught every eye and a smile that seemed designed specifically for him. Their connection had been immediate, electric, almost too perfect. She was beautiful, intelligent, cultured. She spoke 3 languages, knew art, understood wine. She laughed at his jokes, listened to his stories, and never once asked about his money. That last part should have comforted him. Instead, it haunted him, because in his world, everyone wanted something. The people who claimed they didn't were often the most dangerous of all. They were patient, strategic, willing to play the long game. Marcus opened the folder. Inside were photographs, receipts, background checks, nothing damning, nothing criminal, but also nothing that told him what he desperately needed to know. Was Victoria Ashford in love with Marcus Kane, or with his 9-figure net worth? The question had kept him awake for months, twisting through his thoughts like smoke. He had tried to dismiss it, tried to trust, tried to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had found someone real. But the memory wouldn't let him. 7 years ago, before Kane Industries became a household name, before the Forbes lists and the speaking engagements, Marcus had been engaged to a woman named Jennifer. She had been there during the startup days, through the 80-hour work weeks, the ramen dinners, the uncertainty. She had said she loved him. She had worn his grandmother's ring. She had planned their wedding. Then the company went public. The valuation soared. And 3 weeks later, Jennifer was photographed leaving a hotel with his former business partner, a man who had walked away with $40 million in the acquisition. The note she left was brief. "I'm sorry. I thought I could do this. I can't. You were always married to your work anyway." But Marcus had seen the prenup she'd been negotiating behind his back. He had seen the calculations, the lawyer's notes, the strategic timeline. She had been patient, too, just not patient enough. Since then, every relationship had felt like a negotiation. Every "I love you" sounded like an opening bid. Every tender moment carried the question, what does she really want? He closed the folder and stood. There was only one way to know for certain. Marcus had built his fortune on calculated risks, on seeing opportunities others missed, on testing theories until they proved true or false. Today, he would test Victoria. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Daniel, I need you to execute Plan B, everything we discussed, starting now." "Are you certain, sir?" "I've never been more certain of anything." Victoria was exactly where Daniel had said she would be, curled into one of the leather chairs in the executive lounge, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as Marcus entered, and her face transformed into a smile that could have melted steel. "There you are," she said, rising to meet him. She wore a cream blouse and tailored pants, elegant and understated. Her dark hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me." Never, Marcus said, kissing her cheek. Her perfume was subtle, expensive. Everything about Victoria was carefully chosen, perfectly executed. Was that who she was, or who she thought he wanted? I made us reservations at Aurelio's for 8, she said, looping her arm through his. I know you've had a long week. I thought we deserved something special. Actually, Marcus said carefully, I need to talk to you about something first. Something serious. Her smile faltered slightly. Is everything okay? Let's sit. They settled into the chairs by the window. The city sprawled below them, infinite and indifferent. Marcus took a slow breath. He had rehearsed this moment a dozen times, but now that it was here, the words felt heavy on his tongue. Victoria, there's no easy way to say this. The company is in trouble. Serious trouble. She blinked, her expression shifting from concern to confusion. What do you mean? We made some investments last quarter that didn't pan out. Then there was the lawsuit, the regulatory issues in Europe, the supply chain collapse. He rubbed his face, letting genuine exhaustion show through. I've been trying to fix it, trying to keep it quiet, but the board met this morning. And Kane Industries is filing for bankruptcy. We have about 90 days before it's public, before everything falls apart. The silence that followed felt like falling. Victoria's hand had frozen halfway to her mouth. Marcus, how is that possible? Bad decisions, bad timing, bad luck. He looked at her directly. I'm going to lose everything, Victoria. The company, the apartments, the assets. My lawyers are trying to salvage what they can, but I'm looking at starting over from scratch. From scratch, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll have my skills, my reputation, if it survives this. But the money, the lifestyle, all of it, gone. Victoria stood slowly and walked to the window. Marcus watched her reflection in the glass, studied the way her shoulders tensed, the way her fingers gripped her phone. This was the moment. This was where he would see the truth. She turned back to him, and her eyes were wet. How long have you known? A few weeks? I didn't want to worry you until I knew for certain. A few weeks. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus, I'm your girlfriend. You should have told me immediately. I know, I didn't know how. She crossed back to him and knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. Look at me. He did. Do you really think I'm with you because of the money? The question hung between them like a blade. I don't know, he said honestly. That's what scares me. Something flickered across her face, too quick to read. Hurt, maybe, or anger, or something else entirely. I see, she said softly. She stood and gathered her purse. I need some air. I need to think. Victoria, No, it's fine. It's a lot to process. I just need some time. She walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. For what it's worth, she said without turning around, I thought we were building something real. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Marcus sat alone in the empty lounge, staring at the space where she had been. His chest felt tight, his throat constricted. Daniel appeared in the doorway moments later. Well? Daniel asked. She left. Do you want me to follow through with the rest? Marcus nodded slowly. Everything. I need to see how deep this goes. Over the next 3 days, Marcus watched his carefully constructed test unfold. First came the news leak. Nothing official, just carefully planted whispers in industry circles. Kane Industries in trouble. Possible bankruptcy filing. Major investor pullout. His phone started ringing within hours. Business contacts, acquaintances, people he hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know if it was true, if he needed help, if there was anything they could do. Everyone except Victoria. She didn't call, didn't text. Her social media went quiet. When he drove past her apartment building, her car was gone. Daniel provided updates throughout. She had lunch with 2 of her friends yesterday. Talked for 3 hours. She canceled her gym membership. She's been researching bankruptcy law. Marcus listened to each report, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. Was she calculating her exit, planning her escape, protecting her assets? On the fourth day, he received a text from an unknown number. Coffee shop on Morrison Street. 1 hour. Come alone. He recognized the neighborhood. It was nowhere near his usual haunts, nowhere flashy or expensive, just a quiet corner shop in a residential area where people nursed their lattes and typed on laptops. Marcus arrived early, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window. Victoria walked in exactly on time. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater, no makeup, no jewelry except for a simple watch. She looked tired, but there was something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Something solid. She sat down across from him without ordering anything. "Hi," she said. "Hi, hey." They stared at each other for a long moment. "I've spent the last 4 days thinking," Victoria said. "About us, about everything you told me, about what it means." Marcus said nothing, just waited. "I called my father," she continued. "Asked him about bankruptcy, about recovery, about what happens next. He worked in restructuring for 30 years. He's seen companies come back from worse." Victoria. "I'm not finished." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I also looked at my savings, my assets, what I could liquidate quickly. I have about $85,000 in accessible funds. It's not much compared to what you're used to, but it's something. It's a start." Marcus felt his breath catch. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table. "This is a promissory note. I know it's not legally binding without witnesses and notarization, but I wanted you to see it. $85,000. No interest, no timeline for repayment, just there if you need it." His hands trembled as he picked up the paper. Her handwriting was neat, careful, every detail spelled out with precision. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Because 7 months ago, I walked into that gala expecting another boring evening of fake smiles and empty conversations. Then I met you, and you asked me about the book I was reading instead of complimenting my dress. You wanted to know what I thought about the art instead of what I did for a living. You made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months." She leaned forward. "The first time you took me to dinner, you apologized for being distracted because you were worried about an employee whose mother was sick. You asked me about my dreams, my fears, my childhood. You remembered that I hate cilantro and love old bookstores. You notice when I'm tired, when I'm stressed, when something's bothering me." Her voice cracked slightly. "So no, Marcus, I didn't fall in love with your money. I didn't even fall in love with your success. I fell in love with the man who carries granola bars in his car because he skips lunch. The man who calls his mother every Sunday. The man who leaves sticky notes on his mirror to remember people's birthdays." Tears were running down her cheeks now. "I fell in love with you. Just you. And if you're about to lose everything, then we'll figure it out together, because that's what people do when they love each other. They stay." Marcus couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. He stared at the promissory note, at her careful handwriting, at the signature at the bottom. This woman, this beautiful, kind, patient woman, was offering him everything she had, and he had doubted her. "Victoria," he finally whispered, "I need to tell you something." She wiped her eyes. "What?" "The company isn't bankrupt." She froze. "Kane Industries is fine. Better than fine, actually. We just closed our biggest deal ever. The stock is at an all-time high." The color drained from her face. "What are you saying?" "I lied to you. I made it all up. The bankruptcy, the losses, all of it. I wanted to see—" His voice broke. "I wanted to know if you'd stay." Victoria stood slowly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You tested me," she said, her voice hollow. "Yes. You lied to me, made me think you were losing everything, put me through 4 days of hell because you wanted to see if I'd stay. Victoria, I'm sorry, You just what? Her voice rose. You just didn't trust me? After 7 months, after everything? People in the coffee shop were starting to stare. I needed to know, Marcus said desperately. In my world, everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. I've been used before, Victoria. I've been lied to, manipulated. So you decided to lie and manipulate me first? She laughed bitterly. Congratulations, Marcus. You won. You got your answer. She grabbed her purse. Victoria, please. You know what the worst part is? She looked at him with eyes full of tears and fury. I actually felt guilty. For not having more to give you. For only being able to offer $85,000. I felt like it wasn't enough. She turned toward the door. Wait, Marcus said, standing. Just wait. She paused but didn't turn around. I know I don't deserve it, he said, his voice raw. I know I betrayed your trust. But please, please let me try to fix this. Victoria looked back at him over her shoulder. You want to fix this? Then figure out who hurt you so badly that you can't recognize love when it's standing right in front of you. And then she walked out, leaving him alone in a coffee shop full of strangers, holding a promissory note for money he didn't need from a woman he had just lost. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum. Marcus stood in the center of his living room, surrounded by everything his success had bought him. Italian marble floors, custom furniture, art pieces worth more than some houses, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the entire city, a constant reminder that he stood above it all. But tonight, it felt like a prison. He had returned home after the coffee shop, driving through the city in a daze. The promissory note sat on his kitchen counter now, smoothed flat, the creases from where Victoria had folded it still visible. $85,000, everything she had, and he had thrown it back in her face with his deception. Daniel found him there an hour later, still staring at the paper. Sir, I heard what happened. I'm sorry. Marcus didn't turn around. You tried to warn me. You said this was a mistake. I said it was risky, Daniel corrected gently. I didn't say don't do it. That wasn't my place. Maybe it should have been. Daniel moved to stand beside him, looking at the note. What she did, offering you her savings like that, that's not something you see every day. I know. So what are you going to do about it? Marcus finally looked at him. What can I do? She's right, I didn't trust her. After 7 months of her showing me nothing but genuine care, I still couldn't believe it was real. Why not? The question hung in the air. Marcus walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. Because Jennifer destroyed something in me. She made me believe that love in my world was always transactional, always conditional. That nobody could separate Marcus the man from Marcus the fortune. And now? Now I've proven myself right by pushing away the one person who actually did. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that cut through everything. Sir, with respect, you're still thinking about this wrong. Marcus turned. You're focused on what you lost, Daniel continued. But what about what she lost? Victoria just found out that the man she loves, the man she was willing to give everything to support, has been lying to her for days, testing her like she's some kind of investment opportunity. Marcus flinched. She's not angry because you have money, Daniel said. She's angry because you didn't trust her heart. And honestly, sir, can you blame her? The words hit like a physical blow. Daniel moved toward the door, then paused. My wife and I, we met when I was nobody. Just a kid with a business degree and a lot of student debt. She married me anyway. 23 years later, she still makes me coffee every morning and leaves notes in my briefcase. He looked back at Marcus. You know why our marriage works? Why what? Because I never once questioned whether she loved me. I just trusted it. And that trust, that faith in each other, that's what makes everything else possible. After Daniel left, Marcus sat alone in the silence. He thought about the past 7 months, really thought about them, without the filter of suspicion he had been viewing everything through. He remembered their third date, when she had insisted on splitting the bill. "I want this to feel equal," she had said. He'd thought it was a game then, a way to seem humble. He remembered the time she'd given him a first-edition book for his birthday, something she'd found in a tiny shop and saved for months to afford. "I know you have everything," she'd said, "but you don't have this." He'd thought she was trying to prove something. He remembered how she'd turned down his offer to fly her family out first class for Thanksgiving. "My dad gets anxious on planes," she'd explained. "He prefers driving." "But thank you for thinking of them," he'd thought she was playing hard to get. Every genuine gesture, every authentic moment, he had twisted into evidence of manipulation. The truth settled over him like cold water. Victoria hadn't failed his test. He had failed hers. The next morning, Marcus stood outside Victoria's apartment building, holding 2 cups of coffee. He'd been there for an hour, waiting, knowing she'd eventually have to leave for work. When she finally emerged, she froze on the steps. "Victoria, please, just 5 minutes." "I have nothing to say to you." "Then don't say anything. Just listen." She hesitated, then checked her watch. "You have 3 minutes." He handed her one of the coffees. She took it, but didn't drink. "I don't know how to start this," Marcus said, "because there's no excuse for what I did. There's no justification that makes it okay." "Then why are you here?" "Because you deserve to know the truth. Not the test, not the lie, but the real truth about why I did something so unforgivable." Victoria's expression was guarded, but she was listening. "7 years ago, I was engaged," Marcus began. "Her name was Jennifer. We'd been together since before Kane Industries existed, through all the struggles, all the uncertainty. When the company finally made it big, I thought we'd finally have the life we'd dreamed about." He paused, the memory still sharp. "But success changed things. Suddenly I was worth something, and suddenly she was gone. I found out later she'd been planning her exit for months, calculating exactly how much she could take. She didn't love me, Victoria. She loved what I could give her. So you assumed I was the same. I assumed everyone was the same. I built walls so high that even when someone genuine came along, I couldn't see it, couldn't trust it." Victoria's jaw tightened. "That's tragic, Marcus. Really, but it doesn't give you the right to punish me for someone else's betrayal." "You're absolutely right. It doesn't." A taxi honked somewhere down the street. People rushed past them on the sidewalk, caught up in their own morning routines. "Victoria, you offered me everything you had. Not because you had to, not because I asked, but because you loved me enough to want to help. And instead of recognizing that gift for what it was, instead of treasuring it, I revealed it as the final piece of a sick experiment." His voice cracked. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to understand. I just needed you to know that you were right. About everything. I am broken. I am damaged. And I let that damage hurt the best thing that ever happened to me." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "Do you know what I did after I left that coffee shop?" Marcus shook his head. "I went home and cried for 2 hours, not because you had money and lied about not having it, but because the man I loved, the man I thought I knew, didn't know me at all." The words cut deep. "Every moment we shared," she continued, "every laugh, every conversation, every time I opened up to you, you were watching me like I was a suspect, analyzing my words, measuring my reactions, looking for evidence of some hidden agenda." "Victoria?" "I'm not finished." Her eyes were wet now, but her voice stayed steady. "The worst part is that I understand why you did it. I understand that you've been hurt, that you've learned to protect yourself. But Marcus, love isn't protection. Love is the opposite. It's vulnerability. It's choosing to trust even when you're scared. It's the risk." She took a shaky breath. "And I took that risk. I jumped without a safety net. I gave you my heart completely, honestly, and you were standing there with a clipboard, checking boxes, grading my performance. Marcus felt tears running down his own face now. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo what happened. Sorry doesn't give me back the trust I had in us." She handed him back the coffee, untouched. "I need time, Marcus. I need space to figure out if I can ever look at you again without wondering if it's real or just another test." She walked past him down the steps. "Victoria," he called after her. "What can I do? Tell me what to do." She turned back, and the sadness in her eyes nearly broke him. "Figure out how to trust yourself," she said. "Because until you can believe that you're worth loving for who you are, not what you have, you'll never be able to trust anyone else's love either." Then she was gone, disappearing into the morning crowd. Marcus stood on the steps for a long time after she left, holding 2 cups of coffee, feeling more alone than he'd ever felt in his life. The days that followed were the hardest Marcus had ever endured. He threw himself into work, but even the board meetings and strategy sessions felt hollow. Daniel noticed but said nothing, just quietly managed things around his boss's distraction. At night, Marcus found himself in places he'd never been before. Not expensive restaurants or exclusive clubs, but quiet cafes, neighborhood parks, ordinary places where ordinary people lived their ordinary lives. He watched couples share pizza at corner shops, their laughter genuine and unguarded. He saw parents push strollers through playgrounds, their joy measured not in dollars but in giggles and scraped knees. He observed friendships built on nothing more than shared history and mutual respect. And he realized how isolated he'd become in his tower of success. One evening he found himself in a bookstore, the kind Victoria had mentioned loving, small, cramped, smelling of old paper and coffee. He wandered the aisles aimlessly until he found himself in front of a shelf labeled Poetry. He picked up a slim volume at random and opened it. Love is not a contract to be negotiated, but a leap to be taken. Marcus read the line 3 times, then bought the book. That night, he sat on his balcony and started reading. Not business journals or financial reports, but poetry essays, novels about people and feelings and the messy, complicated business of being human. He began to see what Victoria had been trying to tell him. The next week, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He started therapy. Dr. Sarah Chen's office was nothing like he expected. No leather couch, no notepad, just 2 comfortable chairs and a woman with kind eyes who didn't seem impressed by his resume. "Tell me why you're here," she said simply. And Marcus, who had built an empire on always having the right answer, said the most honest thing he'd said in years, "Because I'm terrified of being loved." Dr. Chen nodded. "Tell me more about that." Over the following sessions, Marcus began unpacking years of conditioning, years of learning to see relationships as transactions, years of protecting himself so thoroughly that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be open. "You're not broken," Dr. Chen told him during their 4th session. "You're hurt. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Hurt things can heal." How do I heal? By accepting that being hurt was real, but letting it define every future relationship isn't fair, not to others and not to yourself. Marcus thought about Victoria offering him her savings, about the tremor in her hands as she slid that promissory note across the table, about the fear in her eyes that it wouldn't be enough. "I hurt someone," he said quietly, "someone who didn't deserve it." "Then the question isn't, can you fix it?" Dr. Chen said. "The question is, are you willing to become the person who would never hurt her again?" That night, Marcus sat at his desk and began writing. Not a text message, not an email, but an actual letter, pen on paper, words flowing from somewhere deeper than strategy or planning. He wrote about Jennifer, about the walls he'd built, about the fear that had governed his life for 7 years. He wrote about meeting Victoria, about every moment he'd doubted her, about the test and its devastating aftermath. But mostly he wrote about the man he wanted to become. 3 weeks after their confrontation on her apartment steps, Victoria received a package. Inside was a leather-bound journal. The first entry was Marcus's letter, pasted carefully onto the opening page. The subsequent pages were filled with his handwriting, entries dated each day since their separation. Some entries were short. Today I realized I don't actually know my doorman's name. We've exchanged greetings for 3 years. I asked him today. It's Robert. He has 2 daughters. Others were longer, deeper. Dr. Chen asked me what I was afraid of. I said being used. She asked what I was really afraid of. I couldn't answer then, but I know now. I'm afraid that if someone loves me, for me, just me, without the money or the success, they'll discover I'm not enough, that I'm ordinary, that I'm forgettable. The money is armor. If they want that, at least I know what they're after. But if they want me, then I have to believe I'm worth wanting, and I'm not sure I do. Victoria read every entry, tears streaming down her face. There were descriptions of his therapy sessions, his struggles, his small victories. He wrote about learning to tip better because he'd started noticing people, not just services, about volunteering at a food bank on weekends, about having real conversations with his employees instead of just reviewing their performance metrics. He wrote about missing her. I saw a woman reading in the park today. She was completely absorbed the way you get. I wanted to ask what book it was, to share that moment, but it wasn't you, and asking felt like I was trying to replace something irreplaceable, so I just walked past. But I thought about you for hours after. The final entry was dated yesterday. I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I needed you to see that I'm trying, not trying to win you back, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't want that, but trying to become the man who deserves the kind of love you offered. Whether you're there to see it or not, I want to be better, because you were right. I have to learn to trust myself before I can trust anyone else's love. I'm working on it every day. Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the chance, even though I wasted it. And thank you for loving me, even briefly, in a way I didn't know I needed. Below the journal entries was a check, $85,000, made out to Victoria, with a note attached. This isn't payment. This isn't a transaction. This is me honoring the gift you gave me, not the money, but the willingness to sacrifice for someone you loved. That gift deserves to be returned, free and clear. No strings, no expectations, just gratitude. Victoria sat on her couch for a long time, the journal in her lap, the check in her hands. She thought about the past month, about her own anger and hurt, about the nights she'd lain awake wondering if she'd been wrong to walk away. But she'd needed that time, needed the space to process, to grieve, to remember who she was outside of their relationship. And in that time, she'd done her own work. She'd talked to her friends, her family, her own therapist. She'd examined her patterns, her fears, her tendency to give more than she kept for herself. You have a rescuer complex, her therapist had said gently. You want to save people, to prove your worth through sacrifice. Is that wrong? It's not wrong. But it can't be the foundation of a relationship. You can't love someone because you want to fix them. You have to love them as they are, trust them to do their own healing. Victoria had thought about that a lot. Had she been drawn to Marcus's brokenness? Had some part of her wanted to be the one to heal him, to prove she was different from everyone who'd hurt him? Maybe. But that didn't excuse what he'd done, and it didn't mean she had to accept it. She looked at the journal again, at the evidence of his genuine struggle and growth. This wasn't manipulation. This was transformation. But was it enough? That evening, Victoria found herself outside the building that housed Kane Industries. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't made an appointment. She just needed to see him. The lobby receptionist recognized her. Miss Ashford, it's good to see you. Are you here for Mr. Kane? Is he available? He's just finishing a meeting. Let me call up. 5 minutes later, Victoria was in the elevator, her heart pounding. When the doors opened on the 32nd floor, Marcus was standing there, waiting. He looked different, thinner, tired, but there was something softer in his eyes. "Victoria," he breathed. "Hi." They stood there awkwardly, neither sure what to say. "I got your journal," she finally said. "I didn't know if you would read it." "I read every word." He swallowed hard. And I think you're trying. I think you're doing the work. I think you're becoming the person you need to be." Hope flickered in his expression. "But," she continued, and the hope dimmed, "I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if I can go back to how things were." "I'm not asking you to go back," Marcus said quickly. "I know we can't go back. What I did, the trust I broke, that changed everything. Then what are you asking?" He took a breath. "I'm asking if maybe someday we could start over. Not as who we were, but as who we're becoming. No tests, no games, no walls. Just two people trying to figure out if they can build something real." Victoria felt tears welling up. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "I know, and that's okay. I'm not asking for an answer now. I'm not asking for anything at all, really. I just wanted you to know that I'm here, doing the work, whether you're part of my future or not." She studied his face, looking for the calculation she'd grown to fear. But all she saw was sincerity, vulnerability, hope tempered by acceptance. "Can I ask you something, Ko?" she said. "Anything. If I walked away right now, if I said I couldn't do this, would you be okay?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I'd be devastated," he said honestly, "but I'd survive. I'd keep working on myself, keep trying to be better, because that's not about you anymore, Victoria. That's about me. You showed me what I was missing, but the decision to change, that has to come from inside." She nodded slowly. "That's the right answer." "Is it?" "Yes. Because 3 months ago, you would have said whatever you thought I wanted to hear. You would have promised anything, offered anything, just to keep me from leaving, but now you're telling me you'd be okay without me, and that's when I know you might actually be ready for me." Marcus's eyes widened slightly. Victoria stepped closer. "I'm not ready to jump back in. I'm not ready to pretend none of this happened, but maybe we could start somewhere smaller." "Like what?" "Like coffee, just coffee, once a week. Two people getting to know each other honestly, without expectations or agendas." "You'd be willing to do that?" "I'm willing to try." "Because here's what I learned in the past month, Marcus. I have rescuer tendencies. I jump in trying to save people, to prove I'm worth loving through sacrifice, and that's not healthy either." She took his hand gently. "So if we do this, we do it differently. We both come to the table as works in progress, honest about our struggles, committed to our own growth first. We don't complete each other. We complement each other." Marcus felt tears on his face. "That sounds like the healthiest thing anyone's ever said to me." Victoria smiled, sad but genuine. "Then let's start there. Coffee next Tuesday? I'll be there." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. No fancy places. No Aurelios or wine bars or executive lounges. Just a normal cafe where normal people drink normal coffee. "I know just the place," Marcus said, thinking of the bookstore cafe he'd been visiting. "Morrison Street. There's a little shop there." Victoria's eyes widened. "That's where we—" "I know. I've been going there a lot. Felt like the place where I finally saw things clearly." She nodded. "Tuesday, then, 10 a.m. I'll be there at 9:45. As she turned to leave, Marcus called after her. "Victoria?" She looked back. "Thank you for giving me a chance I don't deserve." "We all deserve chances, Marcus. The question is what we do with them." The elevator doors closed between them. Marcus stood alone in the hallway, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Not triumph, not victory, but something quieter and more valuable. Hope, earned through honesty. The coffee shop on Morrison Street became their sanctuary. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m., they met at the same corner table. Sometimes they talked for an hour, sometimes just 30 minutes. They set boundaries, rules for their slow reconstruction. No gifts, no expensive gestures, just presence and conversation. Marcus told her about his therapy sessions, his struggles with vulnerability, his small victories in connecting with people authentically. Victoria shared her own revelations, her patterns of overgiving, her journey toward healthy boundaries. They weren't dating. They weren't even sure what they were. But they were honest, and that felt like progress. One Tuesday, Marcus arrived to find Victoria already there, but she wasn't alone. An older man sat beside her, his hair gray, his eyes kind and weathered. "Marcus," Victoria said, this is my father, David." Marcus felt his heart skip. This felt significant. David stood and extended his hand. The famous Marcus Kane. "Just Marcus, sir." David's handshake was firm, assessing. "Victoria told me about you, about everything. I can imagine what you must think of me." "Actually," David said, sitting back down, "I asked to meet you." "Victoria didn't want me to, said it was too soon, but I needed to see for myself." Marcus glanced at Victoria, who looked slightly embarrassed. "See what, sir? Whether you were the fool who tested my daughter or the man who's trying to become worthy of her second chance." The directness startled Marcus. He sat down slowly. "I was the fool, sir. I am trying to be the man. I don't know if I'll get there." David studied him for a long moment. "Do you know what I do for a living, Marcus?" Victoria mentioned you worked in restructuring. "For 37 years, I helped companies survive bankruptcy. Real bankruptcy, not fake tests. I've seen men lose everything, their businesses, their families, their sense of self. And I've seen which ones rebuild and which ones don't." He leaned forward. "The ones who rebuild, they all have one thing in common. They stop pretending they have all the answers. They ask for help. They admit they're scared. They do the humbling work of starting over." Marcus nodded slowly. "So here's my question," David continued. "Are you doing this whole therapy and transformation thing to win my daughter back? Or because you finally realized you needed to?" The question hung heavy. Marcus looked at Victoria, then back at David. 6 weeks ago, I would have said it was for her. I would have meant it too. But the truth is, Dr. Chen asked me the same thing last week. And I realized that even if Victoria and I never get back together, I need to do this work. I need to become someone I can respect." He paused. "I've spent 7 years being angry at Jennifer for lying to me. But I've been lying to myself longer than that, telling myself that success was enough, that control was safety, that walls were protection. Your daughter showed me they weren't. They were just prisons I'd built with better materials." David's expression softened slightly. "And now?" "Now I'm trying to learn what it means to be open, to trust, to believe that I'm worth loving not because of what I've built, but because of who I am. It's terrifying, honestly, but it's also the most real thing I've done in years." David glanced at his daughter, then back at Marcus. "You hurt her badly." "I know. She's my only child. I've spent her whole life trying to protect her from people who would use her kindness against her." "I understand. But she's also not a child anymore. She makes her own choices. And if she's choosing to give you this second chance, then I'll respect that. But Marcus?" "Yes, sir?" "You don't get a third chance. Not from her, and definitely not from me." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I wouldn't accept one if offered, sir. This is already more than I deserve." David stood, extending his hand again. This time, the handshake felt different, less like assessment and more like acknowledgement. "Coffee's on me," David said. "Victoria tells me you've been buying every week. Let an old man return the favor." As David walked to the counter, Victoria let out a breath. "I'm sorry," he insisted. "I should have warned you." "No," Marcus said. "I'm glad he came. He had every right to. He likes you. He won't admit it, but he does. How can you tell? Because he didn't threaten to break your kneecaps. That's his version of approval. Marcus laughed, and Victoria smiled. It was the first genuinely easy moment they'd shared in months. The weeks continued, each Tuesday another small step forward. They started taking walks after coffee, wandering through neighborhoods neither had explored before. They talked about books, childhood memories, dreams beyond business plans, and career goals. Marcus introduced Victoria to Daniel, properly this time. "This is Victoria, the woman I told you about, the one I messed everything up with." Daniel smiled warmly. "The one he's trying to deserve." Victoria blushed. "I'm just Victoria." "There is no just about you," Daniel said. "Any woman who could make this workaholic show up on time for weekly coffee dates and actually talk about feelings is remarkable in my book." Slowly, carefully, they began building something new. Not a resurrection of what they'd had, but something different, something more honest. One Tuesday in late spring, 3 months after their reconnection, Victoria arrived with a small wrapped package. "What's this?" Marcus asked. "It's not expensive," she said quickly. "I just saw it and thought of you." Inside was a simple leather bookmark, embossed with a quote, "The bravest thing you can do is be vulnerable." Marcus traced the words with his finger. "I've been carrying this in my bag for 2 weeks," Victoria admitted, "trying to decide if giving it to you was breaking our no gifts rule. And I decided it's not really a gift. It's more like a reminder, for both of us." Marcus looked up at her, and something passed between them. Something that felt like understanding, like partnership, like the beginning of trust rebuilt from ashes. "Victoria," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "These past few months, coming here every week, talking, walking, just being together, has it felt like enough? Or are you just being patient?" She considered the question carefully. "At first I was being patient, giving you time, giving myself time. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like patience and started feeling like presence. Like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Even though we're not officially together? Maybe especially because we're not officially together. We're not performing for each other, Marcus. We're just being real. And that feels more intimate than anything we had before." He nodded slowly. "I feel the same way, and that actually scares me a little." "Why?" "Because I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to realize you're wasting your time, for this to all fall apart." Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time they'd touched intentionally in months. "Hey," she said gently, "you're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Waiting for the disaster, planning for the loss. Marcus, what if the other shoe doesn't drop? What if this just keeps getting better?" He looked at their intertwined hands. "I don't know how to trust that." "I know, but that's what we're here for, to practice, to learn, together." They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped across a coffee-stained table in an ordinary cafe, doing the extraordinary work of choosing each other, honestly, slowly, one Tuesday at a time. Outside, spring was blooming. The city hummed with life. And inside the small coffee shop on Morrison Street, 2 broken people continued the patient work of becoming whole, not for each other, but with each other, and somehow that made all the difference. 6 months after their first Tuesday coffee, Victoria and Marcus stood together at a charity gala, not the one where they'd first met, but a different event, one supporting literacy programs in underprivileged schools. Victoria had invited him as her +1, a reversal that felt symbolically important. Marcus wore a simple suit, elegant but not ostentatious. Victoria wore a dress she'd owned for years, beautiful not because of its price tag, but because of how she carried herself in it. They arrived separately, by choice. They were together, but not in the way the society pages would define it. They were partners in something deeper than labels. "There's someone I want you to meet," Victoria said, leading him toward a corner of the ballroom. A young woman stood there, maybe 19, looking overwhelmed by the crowd. She clutched a small purse and kept glancing toward the exit. "Sophia," Victoria said warmly, "I'm so glad you came." The girl's face lit up. "Miss Ashford!" "I almost didn't. This is so fancy." "Sophia, this is my friend Marcus. Marcus, this is Sophia Chen. She's one of the students in our Story Nest mentorship program." Marcus extended his hand. "It's wonderful to meet you." Sophia shook it shyly. "Ms. Ashford talks about you sometimes. She said you help fund the program." "I do," Marcus said, "but Victoria runs it. She's the heart of everything we do to—" Victoria blushed slightly. She'd been surprised 2 months ago when Marcus had made a substantial anonymous donation to Story Nest, the literacy program she'd started volunteering with. It was only later she learned it had been his suggestion to expand the program, his connections, that helped secure more funding. But he'd done it all quietly, through intermediaries, never seeking credit. "Tell Marcus about your scholarship," Victoria prompted gently. Sophia's face became animated. "I got into State University." "Full ride." "I'm going to study education, maybe become a teacher." "That's incredible," Marcus said genuinely. "Congratulations." "I wouldn't have even applied if it weren't for Miss Ashford. She helped me with my essays, my applications, everything. She believed I could do it before I did." After Sophia moved on to mingle nervously, Marcus turned to Victoria. "You didn't tell me about her?" "There are a lot of students." I didn't want to brag. "That's not bragging, Victoria. That's changing someone's life." She shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "I just showed up. Anyone could have done it. But you did do it. That's what matters." Later, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, much like that night months ago when everything had fallen apart. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria said. "Always." "I've been scared too. All these months, every Tuesday, I've been terrified." Marcus turned to her, surprised. "Of what?" "Of this becoming another pattern. Of me falling into my rescuer role, of you falling into your protector role, of us building something that looks healthy but isn't. Of history repeating itself in different clothes." "I didn't know you felt that way." "I haven't wanted to burden you with it. You've been doing so much work, making so much progress. I didn't want to add my anxieties to yours." Marcus took her hand gently. "Victoria, that's exactly what we promised we wouldn't do. We said we'd be honest, even when it's hard." She nodded, tears forming. "You're right." "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just talk to me. What are you afraid of?" She took a shaky breath. "I'm afraid that I'm not over what happened, that I say I've forgiven you, but some part of me is still waiting for you to test me again, to doubt me again. And that fear, it makes me hold back, makes me question whether I'm really here because I want to be, or because I want to prove I can be." Marcus listened, really listened, without defensiveness or explanation. "Thank you for telling me that," he said finally. "You're not upset?" "Why would I be upset? You're being honest about your feelings. That's exactly what we need. But it means I don't trust you completely yet." "And that's okay," Marcus said firmly. "Victoria, I broke your trust. Severely. The fact that you're here at all, that you've given me these months, that's already more grace than I deserve. I don't expect you to be over it. I just need you to keep being honest about where you are." She looked at him with wonder. 6 months ago, you would have spiraled hearing that. 6 months ago, I thought love was about certainty, about control and guarantees. Now I'm learning it's about showing up anyway, even in uncertainty. Victoria smiled through her tears. "When did you get so wise?" "Tuesdays at 10 a.m., apparently." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. "Marcus," Victoria said softly. "Yes? I think I'm falling in love with you again. This new you, this honest you. But slowly this time, carefully." His breath caught. "Is that okay? The slowly part?" "It's more than okay. It's exactly right. He squeezed her hand. Then we'll go slow. As slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. Because I'm falling in love with you too, with this brave, honest, beautifully imperfect version of us. And this time, I don't want to rush it. I want to savor every moment. Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stood like that, not as a perfect couple with all the answers, but as two people choosing each other, honestly and imperfectly, one moment at a time. The months that followed were not without challenges. There were hard conversations when old wounds resurfaced, Tuesday mornings when one of them arrived carrying the weight of doubt, moments when Victoria's fear of being tested again collided with Marcus's fear of losing her. But they kept showing up. They started couples therapy together, sitting side by side in Dr. Chen's office, learning how to communicate without walls, how to fight fairly, how to build something sustainable. You're doing the work, Dr. Chen told them during one session. Both of you. That's rarer than you think. Marcus began introducing Victoria properly to the parts of his life he'd kept separate before. Not the business dinners and networking events, but the real things. His mother, who lived in a modest home upstate and cried when she met Victoria. His younger brother, who worked as a teacher and had always felt overshadowed by Marcus's success. She's good for you, his brother said privately. You smile differently now, like it reaches your eyes. Victoria, in turn, brought Marcus deeper into her world. They volunteered together at Story Nest, reading to children, organizing book drives, building something meaningful beyond balance sheets and profit margins. One Saturday afternoon, they painted a community center together, covered in spatters of yellow paint, laughing as they worked alongside a dozen other volunteers. You have paint in your hair, Victoria said, reaching up to wipe it away. So do you, Marcus replied, touching her cheek gently. It was such a small moment, so ordinary, but it felt more real than any expensive date ever had. The moment came on a Tuesday, of course. Nearly a year after their reconnection, they sat at their usual table with their usual coffee, but something felt different. The air between them had shifted, like they'd reached some invisible threshold. I've been thinking, Victoria said, stirring sugar into her cup. About? About us. About where we are. About what comes next. Marcus felt his heart rate increase, but he stayed quiet, letting her find her words. For the past year, we've been building something, she continued. Slowly, carefully, with intention. And somewhere along the way, I realized something. What's that? She looked up at him, her eyes clear and certain. I trust you again. Not perfectly, not without scars, but genuinely. I trust that you see me, that you value me for who I am, that you're not keeping score or running tests. Marcus felt emotion rise in his throat. And I trust myself, Victoria continued. I trust that I'm here because I want to be, not because I need to prove something or save someone. I'm here because you make me laugh, because you listen when I'm scared, because you're not afraid to be imperfect in front of me. She reached across and took his hand. So I'm ready, Marcus. If you are, I'm ready to stop calling this rebuilding and start calling it what it is. What is it, Ba? He asked softly. Love? Real, imperfect, hard-earned love. Marcus stood up from his chair and came around to her side of the table. He knelt beside her, not in proposal, but in gratitude, taking both her hands in his. Victoria Ashford, I love you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Not because you complete me, but because you challenge me to be better. You make me want to tear down walls instead of building them. You make me believe that vulnerability is strength, not weakness. Tears were streaming down her face now. I don't have a ring, he said. I don't have a grand gesture. I just have this, my heart, honestly offered, with all its cracks and repairs visible. It's imperfect, but it's yours if you want it. I want it, Victoria whispered. I want all of it. He stood and pulled her into his arms, and they held each other in the middle of the coffee shop while the barista smiled and the other customers pretended not to notice. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing and crying, Victoria said, "So, what now?" "Now?" Marcus smiled. "Now we keep doing exactly what we've been doing. We keep showing up. We keep being honest. We keep choosing each other. No fancy proposals? No grand romantic gestures? Not unless you want them. I learned something this past year, Victoria. The grand gestures are easy. It's the small, consistent choices that matter. The Tuesday mornings, the honest conversations, the paint-splattered Saturdays." She nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." "Together?" "Together." 3 years later, the small house on Morrison Street had become something of a landmark in the neighborhood. It wasn't grand, just a modest 2-story with a front porch and a small garden. But it had something the penthouse never had: warmth, life, love. Marcus had sold most of his properties, kept the company, but restructured his role to allow for actual life balance. He still worked, still succeeded, but it no longer defined him. Victoria ran Story Nest full-time now, expanded into 5 cities, changing lives one book at a time. She'd published a children's book last year, dedicated to Marcus, who taught me that second chapters can be better than first. They'd gotten married on a Tuesday, naturally. Small ceremony, close friends and family, in the same coffee shop where they'd rebuilt everything. The owner had been honored, closing for the afternoon to host the most unconventional wedding the neighborhood had ever seen. Now, on a quiet Sunday morning, Victoria sat on their porch swing reading while Marcus worked in the garden. They'd planted tomatoes this year, though neither of them really knew what they were doing. "These might actually grow," Marcus called out, examining the small green fruits forming on the vines. "Miracles happen," Victoria replied, not looking up from her book. A car pulled up, and Sophia emerged, now 22, and home from university for the weekend. She'd become like family over the years, often stopping by for advice, for dinner, or just to sit on the porch and talk. "Aunt V?" "Uncle Marcus," she called out, using the nickname she'd given them. They both looked up, smiling. "You're just in time," Marcus said. "I'm about to prove I can grill vegetables without burning them." "That would be a first," Sophia teased. Inside, the house was filled with photographs, not the staged professional kind, but real moments. Marcus covered in paint, Victoria laughing mid-sentence, the 3 of them at Sophia's graduation, Daniel and his wife at their annual dinner gathering. On the mantel sat a framed piece of paper, slightly yellowed now, the promissory note preserved behind glass, not as a reminder of pain, but as a symbol of the gift that had changed everything. Below it, Marcus had added a small plaque: "Sometimes the truest tests are the ones we fail, because they teach us what really matters." That evening, after Sophia left and the dishes were done, Marcus and Victoria sat together on the porch as the sun set. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Victoria asked. "If I hadn't given you that second chance?" Marcus considered it. "Every day, and every day I'm grateful you did. Even though it was hard? Even though we had to rebuild everything from scratch?" "Especially because of that," he said. "The easy version of us wouldn't have lasted. We would have crumbled at the first real challenge. But this version, the one we built slowly, honestly, with all our scars showing, this one's unbreakable." Victoria smiled and leaned into him. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "I'm not afraid anymore. Of being tested, of not being enough, of any of it. Because we've already been through the worst, and we came out stronger." "Me too," Marcus said. "I used to think trust was something you gave once, and either kept or lost forever. Now I know it's something you build, every day, with every choice." They sat in comfortable silence as the streetlights flickered on and the neighborhood settled into evening. "Marcus?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For failing your own test. for being human enough to make a terrible mistake and brave enough to fix it, for showing me that love isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. He kissed the top of her head. Thank you for seeing past the mistake to the man trying to do better. Inside the house, a timer chimed, reminding them of the cookies they'd put in the oven, slightly burnt around the edges because they'd been too busy talking to remember them in time. They laughed as they rushed inside, and that sound, that genuine, unguarded laughter, was everything. Because Marcus Kane had learned something that all his business success never taught him, that the best investments aren't measured in returns, but in moments. In Tuesday morning coffees and paint-splattered Saturdays, in burnt cookies and garden tomatoes, in the patient, imperfect, beautiful work of showing up for someone honestly every single day. And Victoria Ashford had learned that her worth wasn't measured in what she gave or who she saved, but in the simple fact of her existence. That being loved didn't require sacrifice, just authenticity. Together, they had learned the most important lesson of all. That sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters. That trust, once broken, can be rebuilt even stronger than before. That love isn't about passing tests or proving worthiness. It's about choosing each other, imperfectly and honestly, over and over again. And that's exactly what they did, every day, starting with Tuesdays. Thank you for sharing this journey of testing, loss, and redemption. If this story reminded you that true love isn't about perfection, but honest persistence, that second chances are worth the hard work, and that vulnerability is the bravest form of strength, then please subscribe to Lucky Encounters. We bring you heartfelt tales of serendipity, where life's unexpected tests reveal the deepest truths about love and what really matters. Click on one of the 2 stories on your screen for more journeys of the heart. Until next time, stay open, stay brave, and remember, sometimes the relationships we almost lose become the ones we treasure most. Subscribe now.